committee meeting to order, please. And I would make a motion we approve the committee meeting minutes from the last. Just a second. All in favor? Aye. Okay. And now we hear from Ryan. If Tom were here, he would tell you to keep it short. So I'm going to sit in for Tom on that one.
Well, Tom's not here, so my limit must be longer.
Don't go on questions, right?
I think it's Bill's was shorter.
So actually this is relatively quick. Two things. One, we're going into budget season, so I wanted to give you an update because this is actually kind of a unique budget year. And two, number 4 on our goals for the Finance and Rules Committee was to establish new long-term financial sustainability goals. We have not addressed that yet, and I'd like to make a suggestion. Eric and I have some ideas about what those new goals could be. So, starting out, just a reminder. There we go. Just a reminder about our budget process. Eric and I have begun meeting with department heads. So far, just the 2 clerks, the Mosers, we've met with, but we've got a bunch more later this week. That happens through August and September. Back at the at the next committee meeting in September, I'll be here to discuss the preliminary budget issues. Really, the 2 largest anchors in our budget are personnel and capital, so we'll go over those next month. October 17th will be our budget workshop this year. The tentative budget will be presented to the board at our November 7th board meeting. And then that date, November 28th, is wrong. It's looking like we might be November 21st for the budget hearing. So more information on that. We don't have our end of the year schedule hammered out yet. So what you've got in front of you is reflective of this graph here. The basis of our budget is property tax. Property tax is determined by the levy amount that we need in comparison to the full taxable value of all property in Lewis County. What you'll notice here is something that is quite unusual. Eric's been doing this a lot more years than I have, but municipal finances. This is my 10th municipal budget. I've never seen anything like this. A 1-year jump of 15.8%. Our taxable value last year that we based the budget on was $2,493,529,000. Our taxable value for this year will be $2,887,365,000. Like I said, nearly 16% year-over-year increase. So, what does that look like? It's different in each town. It's not just due to revaluations, okay? Real estate prices have been going up steeply, and our assessments are catching up. You've got this sheet in front of you so that you can look at it. Before we get into talking about tax rates and what that will look like next year, Candy and Eric and I talked last week. We're going to do something a little different this year because certainly the rate is going to go down. But what we want to talk about is what each bill will look like in each town. And we want to give you a bit more in-depth analysis on that because, for example, Krogan, their equalization rate is now only down to 47.5. There's barely anything we're going to be able to do to prevent their tax bill from going up. So it's frustrating when you read in the news that the county reduced taxes 10% and your bill comes in and it's more. Well, that's because they haven't done a reevaluation in, 25 years, maybe 20 years. So, this just gives you an idea, and we're going to provide that analysis this year, which is something new that we haven't done in the past, but I think it'll be valuable this year. So what's going on? This is off the Federal Reserve website. Nationally, real estate prices have gone up 52.5% since 2018. So the fact that we are up in Lewis County 34% since 2018, it seems like a good context to talk about. We're not, Phoenix, Arizona. We're not Orlando, Florida, right? We're not Westchester County or Nassau. So we're lagging behind the national trend, but still 34% over 5 years is still significant. If we were growing at the national rate, our taxable value would be 3.2 billion, not 2.8. So just an idea of some context. Some additional context. Lewis County is growing, not fast, but we do have growth. We have issued over 3,000 building permits. This excludes Leiden and Lionsdale, for which we do not do building permits. But 3,086 permits over the last well, we don't have 2023, but this is 18 to 22. That's $233 million of value that have been added. So if you're looking to kind of account for, why our base is growing, part of it is real estate prices are going up. Part of it is natural growth. An interesting thing that stood out to me on this, new residential, that's new homes, okay? 454 permits for new residential over 4 years. That was more than I would have expected, quite honestly. Residential improvements are things like garages, additions, decks, fences, those types of things. And then commercial, of course, is commercial. Sales tax, just an update on that, since we're talking big picture finances, continues to be strong. Last year we brought in $18.2 million in sales tax. This year we've got 10.2 that have come in already, and we're about 55-60% through the sales tax collection year. So, and then we obviously don't have the holidays yet. So you can expect that to probably hit similar numbers as last year. Phil's usually pretty straight on with his predictions. So here are our old financial goals established in 2015. Pretty good, actually. Maintain a minimum fund balance of 10% of county and hospital operations. So if you take our budget of $60 million, you take the hospital's budget of $80 million, combine those to $140 million. If we had 10% on hand, that would be a target of $14 million. Today we're sitting obviously above that. Maintain an A+ credit rating, good goal. Maintain current county service levels, and reduce budgeted fund balance to 0. So every year we use a bit of fund balance in order to balance that final levy amount. Last year I believe it was $1.8 million that we used. When I first started it was around $2 million, so we've brought it down a little bit. It is not my recommendation that we continue that goal. One, it's been nearly 10 years and we haven't hit it. And two, fund balance usage is like the ballast in a ship, I think. You could get it to 0 and then you'd just be, that levy would be changing every year based on your different needs. Using fund balance properly is a way to keep your tax rate steady. So I wouldn't actually recommend trying to get it to 0, because one year you do a lot of capital projects, your rate goes up. The next year you don't, your rate goes down. It's better for the taxpayers to be consistent. And so that's why I'm not recommending it.
Times were much different then.
Yeah, fair. So, proposed 2023 fiscal goals. This is just what Eric and I have chatted and come up with. There's no resolution in your packet to adopt these. It's just an initial discussion on what we could put into place. So, county maintain a fund balance between 10 and 30% of annual operations. Just our operations. So if our operations are $60 million a year, that means our target fund balance right now would be between, I'm sorry, that's incorrect. 6 million and, what's 30% of 60 area? 18. And then, so you can see where we are currently. And then separately, we have Lewis County Health System maintain a fund balance of at least 16% of annual operations. So their current operations are $80 million. Their target is $13 million, and they currently have $17 million. And they have already adopted this policy in 2018. A lot of you guys were here, you remember that discussion. No, 16% is 2 months out of 12. So 2 months of operating costs out of 12. It's a 16.6 or whatever, but it's roughly $13 million. So that would be what I would say for our fund balance policy, between $6 million and $16 million for us, and then the hospital maintaining their target of 16%, around $13 million, would be more than sufficient. Credit rating. Maintaining an A+ credit rating is a great goal, something that we have done, we have maintained. I will note, however, that credit ratings across the country for municipal governments are being downgraded to no fault of the municipality. There are parts of this country, upstate New York included, that do not have potentially the best economic future. And credit rating agencies are downgrading those bonds for those communities, even though they've done all the right things. It's partially based on economic outlook and things we can't control. But still, maintaining an A+ is a great goal. Here's a new one. Invest at least 3% of operating budget to capital equipment and projects. We did not do that in the past. And we had a situation where nearly all of our buildings and a lot of our equipment was in very bad shape. Yes, it's a luxury. To Phil's point before, times were different in the past. But as long as we can afford to invest in our capital and our physical plant, we need to do that so that we do not get behind and put ourselves in a situation where we've got to have all of these major investments at once. The last one is regarding debt. Maintain a debt ratio no greater than 50% of our constitutional limit. The constitutional limit is a formula set by the Comptroller's Office. In our last audit, that limit was placed at $163 million. We're currently at $56 million of debt, so we're at $34 million. 82 million would be 50%. So we've obviously got quite a bit of breathing room for more debt. Not that we have any plans to take on any more debt, but I think kind of putting that parameter in place regarding debt would be a wise thing to consider. So I believe that's pretty much it. Thoughts, questions, discussion on these objectives, and do we feel they're appropriate? Should we put it in a new resolution, or do you want to have more discussion? I turn that back over to you, Bill.
Well, personally, I'd like to think about it a little bit more, but
Sure.
but also put it in a resolution at some point. What do you think, Jessica?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that is going to be something we stand by. It should be in a resolution. I struggle with the equalization rate.
Mhm.
You know, we keep saying how we have not raised taxes in the last 10 years, but like you were saying, a lot of us are getting bills that are higher than the previous year, and it's hard to explain to the constituents how we have not increased taxes and yet their tax bill is higher.
So what we can control is the tax rate and the levy. And the rate and the levy are directly proportional to one another. Towns, however, control assessed value, okay? So equalization is a tool which is applied by the state so that towns and villages that don't want to increase their residents' assessments can't allow those residents to pay less to county and school districts that cover multiple jurisdictions. So if the town of Krogan, I'll just pick on them because they haven't done one in a long time. If the town of Krogan says your house is worth $80,000, but the one next door to you just sold for $160,000, you don't get to pay the county's rate at $80,000 worth of property, because you would be getting a discount on all of the county services provided compared to the town of Lowville, which keeps their assessment at 100%.
Okay.
So the state actually applies an equalization rate, which does exactly what it says. It equalizes across the board. So if your house is assessed for $60,000 or $80,000 in this scenario, we would apply the equalization rate so that the rate from the county goes up so that you're paying your fair share. Same with school districts because they cover multiple jurisdictions, right? Otherwise, one jurisdiction could, on behalf of their taxpayers, just keep their assessments low so that they don't have to pay their fair share.
Okay.
So there's a lot of our towns, if you go back. I mean, Kate and I were talking about Port Pinckney. They just did a reevaluation. They've tried to stay on top of it, and they're already down to 81%. So, when the trends are going up quickly, it's hard to stay at 100%. So that's part of it. And another part of it is we say our rate is going down, and that's true, but our levy has consistently gone up, right? So the amount of money that we need from the taxpayers goes up, but the value of their property has gone up as well. So it's usually proportional, and when we're doing it well, it's proportional in a way that allows the rate to go down.
In your crystal ball, what rate do you think we'll have compared to previous years, way back?
The spreadsheet that Eric and I have goes back to 2008. I don't know why, other than we've started in 2018, and I probably asked for a 10-year look back then. So we could look back further than that, but I think we'll be the lowest we've been since 2008. So probably lowest in 20 years. But we have not met with every department. There's a lot of commitments out there. I think it would be too early to make
I was
any
just
strong-
asking for a general.
I think a few things for you to think about as we, key drivers as we work through the budget. And again, as Ryan just said, too early for us to have numbers together yet, but our property tax collection is, we are allowed to go up 2% by state law. We've done that calculation. It's going to be in about the $600,000 range. So do we use that entire amount? As Ryan said, we can control that amount. We can control the rate. So that's something to think about. The other big drivers Ryan's talked about is that increase in value. That it is what it is. I mean, that's the number we're going to use. That's a big factor. And then the other thing to think about is the sales tax collection. We've historically been very conservative in our budgeting. We've seen the trend, and as long as there's not some major decrease in sales tax collection, we should think about how conservative or aggressive we want to be. Because it's, if we have $3 or $4 million in excess sales tax every year, that fund balance, is going to stay very healthy. So, it's something that is a key consideration as we move forward with the rest of the budget.
Well, obviously, in the sales tax this year, the budget was increased, and we're still
Yes.
going to be substantially over by the end of the year.
Right.
And that's a good thing, but that we need to be thinking about what we want to do with that as an exception, not as a rule of the excess. In my thinking, there's got to be one-time things that we should consider, I believe, with that.
Yeah, I think you're talking, Phil, about do we use some of that funds for one-time things?
Yes.
That's a question. I think the other question that, as far as our budget planning for next year is, where do we place that budget for
Right.
next year?
There's two
Two different
issues to that.
Yeah.
But where we use that one-time thing would affect what we would project for next year as well. And I think I expressed to Ryan the thought that maybe we should pay down debt with it at some point, like the old courthouse, for instance. But that's we can worry about that in a little bit, but at least think about it, okay?
Well, the problem there is that old debt has a low interest rate.
I understand that, but it is debt,
Money
and
that 3.3 plus 1 is driving.
Ryan and I argue about that just about every time. But it is debt, and
Understood.
for a one-time use with extra funds, it's nice to get rid of debt. Us old people think about that a lot, But okay.
Glad
I didn't
I'm-
say anything.
Young people don't. Anyway,
I would
You can
agree
make
with
money
you,
off
Phil. I mean, to pay off debt is, you're talking about the future of the county,
right.
my thought is. Although I understand your thought that the interest rates are low on that debt, you can ignore. There's two ways of looking at it.
There's definitely two ways to look at it.
Yeah.
Because right now, you're using the money you could be paying off debt and investing it to make more money.
If you can get 4% off your investments and our annual debt service is 3%.
You're making your
Working
percent.
What
1%
money
by
is-
investing the money rather than paying the debt.
I wish you hadn't said that, Jessica. No, that's a very good point.
Only right now because interest rates are high, but.
Correct.
My only comment on debt and that is that, my philosophy is that governments are not like a household, they're not like a small business. We should be looking in terms of 50, 75, 100 years and making decisions, financial decisions that way. So, but the board, if that is a value of the board, paying down debt, we certainly can afford to do it. No doubt about it.
Okay.
Yeah. So one comment on sales tax. Every year I've kind of given us warning speech about how we don't want to be too aggressive on sales tax. We don't want to be the ones in the newspaper that didn't reach their sales tax budget. There's always, we know the article every year, there's 2 cities that tend to ride the razor's edge.
I know what you're talking about.
But, we might want to start thinking about that calculus a little differently. Maybe because we have decent fund balance and we're not really looking to continue to grow it, maybe we do want to, the risk calculus changes a little bit, where it would be better to undershoot or, over project and then have to take a little out of fund balance rather than continue to undershoot and continue to build this fund balance. You know what I'm saying? So we might want to be more aggressive in terms of, what is the risk, right? The risk that we're continuing to build that we don't need, or that we fall short when we've got plenty in the bank to cover for it. So we might want to be significantly more aggressive. I mean, we've tried to be more aggressive and we still haven't come close. So.
When you're significantly more aggressive, then that, in raising the budgeted amount, then that lowers the tax rate more. And
Sure. Exactly.
and that is a fear that we have of a big increase in the future.
Yeah, good point.
So there's a
would be
give
the
and
first.
take there.
So here's an interesting one, Phil. Look at that. 18.25 is the sales tax we got last year. What was our levy last year? 18.2,
18.
right?
Actually, about 18.6, 18.7.
So for the first time ever in the history, as far as I'm aware, Lewis County, we're getting as much from our sales tax as we are from our levy. One source that we can control, our levy, and 50% that we cannot control. So that is something to think about, because you start relying too much on sales tax and there is a economic downturn. The worst we've had, since Eric and I have been looking back is 2009 to 2010, our sales tax went down 10%. So, that would be $1.8 million compared to last year. So, your levy's that's not gonna happen to your levy because we control the levy, right? So, that is a risk factor.
Well, one thing in that 2015 that you saw about the use of fund balance, that was hiding. We were using too much fund balance, and that had a tendency to hide actual costs.
Yeah,
And that had to be. That's why that was put in there.
Yeah, fair.
But anyway,
No, that's a good point.
there's several things, and you're doing good on it. That's good thing Eric's here.
At least one old guy.
I almost thought you were gonna leave it at that. You caught yourself at the last.
Yeah, I caught myself just in time. Anything else you want to talk? Anybody got any other
Ryan, could you
questions?
go back to the chart for the assessment value?
This one or this one?
No, go back, you had it. So one thing that really jumps out that I've been following the last 3 to 4 years, you look at your top 3, which would be Montague, Osceola, and Pickney. And those townships, what do they have to offer?
Their own recreation.
Is recreation. And as we discussed earlier in the General Service Committee, following the rails of trail is everyone wants to be outdoors doing recreational activities. And those are your 3 streaming townships that are booming right now. There's 450-ish residential homes with building permits. I would have to say a third of those are probably in these townships, which people are buying, building, they're paying into the town tax, and they don't use the same services as we all do as we're year-round residents. They do contribute, but those numbers are, I think, you'll continue to see that in the next 3 to 5 years.
I think if you could summarize kind of our theory in Lewis County, over the last several years, there's been the best way to reduce taxes is to focus on growing the base rather than focus on trying to make cuts. you can cut a $60 million budget 20% and only save $20 million, right? $30 million. If your base grows by 100 million, that's what really, 200 million, 300 million, that's what really is going to drive your rate down, is base growth, not controlling the small amount of costs that we really can through operations. And not that we need to be crazy with our operations, but the focus should be on growing that denominator so that the rate ultimately goes down.
Piggyback on what Josh said, my family lives in one of those townships, and you wouldn't believe the number of new houses and structures being built up there. And we all know what snowmobile season is. It's now happening all summer long too. The side-by-side traffic has gone astronomically up there to where our snowmobile season isn't as daunting as we used to think it was, because now it's a year-round season, or getting close to it at least. It's a lot.
And here's another tidbit to that, back to sales tax. It was just a treasurer's conference, and NISAC always reviews sales tax data, and just a huge factor, we all know it, was the internet sales tax. The law changed in 2019. We're starting to see how incredible that impact was. If somebody builds a second home here, they're not going to go shop at Wegmans in Syracuse. They might be ordering something and having it delivered to their second home in the town of Pinckney, and that sales tax comes here. So that online sales tax is a huge driver for us. It is for every county, but I think the second homes has even more impact maybe in a place like this.
That was a big turning point. You're right.
Huge.
Yeah, I mean, look at that. When was the Supreme Court case? 2020, right? 2019.
2019 it went into impact.
Yeah.
Or into effect.
So, that really.
Late 2019.
Well, I think part of the reason was here, I don't think anyone recognized the amount of online shopping was actually being done, because of the remoteness for the residents here would have to drive 40
Right.
or 100 miles to go to Watertown in my case. So probably the percentage that's bought online is higher in Lewis County than it would be in an urban area.
Right.
That's a good point. Yeah. Particularly wintertime.
The NISAC, when we've looked at the county-wide sales tax at the conferences and whatnot, county by county, the rural ones have popped far more than it's actually the online sales has been at the expense of brick and mortar in many ways. You may have driven to Watertown or Syracuse in the past, now you order online, that revenue stays with us.
Oh, good point, yeah.
And one thing I'll add is these 450 new additional residential homes that are seasonal, I'm not saying they are seasonal, but a large amount are probably seasonal. They're employing and having contracts with local contractors, and they're buying local, they're buying the material local. So our contractors that are local, they're building these new residential homes that are in the town of Pinckney, Montague, Osceola, and they're buying all their supplies local. So it's a domino effect, it's a compounding effect, and it's a good number. It just contributes to everything as a whole.
It's an extrapolation. Causation correlation does not mean causation, but think about this. Our population has gone down, right? But our building permits have gone up. So does that necessarily mean that these are second homes? No. But it's a strong indication that a large percentage are probably not full-time residents.
That's a problem. Take a look at the school enrollment.
Right.
That's another part of the equation.
Are you done?
All the questions that follow.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Authorizing one-year renewal agreement